Charles Vane was a name that struck fear into the hearts of sailors across the Caribbean and the Atlantic. Born around 1680 in England, his life was a storm that raged across the seas, leaving behind tales of cruelty, treachery, and ruthless ambition. His rise was not just the story of a pirate, but of a man who embraced chaos and brutality as his only compass. Vane began his seafaring career on the privateer ship Lord Archibald Hamilton, a vessel operating under a legal government license, a letter of marque. But for a man like Vane, rules felt like chains. Licensed privateering meant only attacking enemy ships, but Vane's hunger was not so easily satisfied. He needed freedom, not orders, and he found it soon enough. Off the coast of Florida, where the warm waters met the wreckage of Spanish treasure galleons, Vane saw his chance. A Spanish treasure fleet had sunk during a fierce storm, and Spanish ships were sent to salvage what they could from the sunken hulls. But before the Spanish could recover their silver, Vane and a group of Jamaican raiders under the leadership of Henry Jennings swooped in. They let the Spaniards do the hard work, then attacked, taking the silver for themselves. This raid was just the beginning. Vane's reputation for ruthlessness grew, like a storm on the horizon. His name became synonymous with betrayal. He took pleasure in torturing prisoners, sometimes offering them mercy only to snatch it away with a cruel smile. But Vane's true cruelty wasn't reserved only for his enemies. His own crew suffered under his greed. He constantly underpaid his men, hoarding the best spoils for himself. His cunning and treachery earned him hatred even among pirates. Yet his fortune continued to rise. By 1716, Vane was no longer a follower. He commanded his own ships, changing flagships as often as the wind changed direction. He seized a 12-gun brigantine, which he named Ranger, and under its black flag, he launched a reign of terror on the Caribbean. Sailors whispered his name with fear, and his cruelty became legend. Reports reached the governor of Bermuda, describing the horrors Vane inflicted on captured sailors. Tales of torture, merciless slaughter, and a twisted joy he seemed to take in the suffering of others. But Vane's cruelty did not go unchallenged. In February 1718, Captain Vincent Pierce of the British Navy was sent to hunt him down aboard the swift and heavily armed frigate Phoenix. Pierce's skill was matched by his determination, and soon he cornered Vane's fleet. Vane's ships were outmatched, but the pirate had one weapon stronger than any cannon: his silver tongue. When captured, Vane begged for mercy, swearing loyalty to the crown and promising to abandon piracy. Pierce, holding a royal pardon for any pirate willing to surrender, granted Vane his freedom. But mercy for Vane was just another weapon. As soon as Captain Pierce's ship disappeared over the horizon, Vane forgot his promises. He returned to his bloody trade without a second thought. In August 1718, Woodes Rogers, the new governor of the Bahamas, arrived in New Providence with a fleet of heavily armed ships and a mission to crush piracy once and for all. Many pirates, fearing the governor's wrath, accepted his pardon and swore to reform. Not Vane. Seizing a recently captured French ship, he set it ablaze and sent it crashing into Roger's fleet as a fiery diversion. Amidst the chaos, he sailed away on the Ranger, guns blazing, laughing at the helpless fury of the governor's men. With New Providence behind him, Vane prowled the American coast, plundering ships and terrorizing sailors. His boldness grew, and so did his arrogance. His greed knew no limits, and even his own officers began to resent him. When his first mate, Yates, demanded a fair share of the loot, Vane refused, sneering at his own men as if they were his servants. Enraged, Yates stole a ship and deserted, taking part of the crew with him. Vane's fury was like a hurricane, but his rage blinded him, and he could only watch as his power slipped through his fingers. In September 1718, with his crew's loyalty crumbling, Vane sailed towards Ocracoke Island. There he met a pirate of even greater fame, Edward Teach, the infamous Blackbeard. For a brief moment, Vane seemed at ease, drinking and feasting with the legendary pirate. But even Blackbeard, for all his ferocity, saw something in Vane that he did not like, a madness, a hunger that was never satisfied. When the revelry ended, they parted ways, each to his own fate. Vane's fate, however, turned darker by the day. His arrogance reached a peak when he attacked a French warship. But this time, fortune was not on his side. His crew, tired of his failures and his cruelty, mutinied. They cast him out, choosing instead to follow Jack Rackham, a pirate known as Calico Jack. Vane, reduced to a single ship with a handful of loyal men, was left adrift. His dreams of wealth and power turned to ashes. His name now a curse even among pirates. His desperate escape led him into a brutal storm in 1719. His ship was shattered, and the sea claimed everything, his gold, his men, and his pride. Vane alone survived, washed ashore on a deserted island in the Bay of Honduras. Days turned to weeks, and hunger gnawed at him like a beast. He watched the horizon, hoping for rescue. And rescue did come, but not as he hoped. A ship appeared, captained by a former pirate named Halford. But Halford knew Vane well and despised him. He refused to help, leaving Vane to his fate. Eventually, another ship rescued him. But fate's cruel hand was not done. Among the crew was Halford, who recognized Vane and exposed him. Shackled and humiliated, the once feared pirate was taken to Jamaica. There, on March 29th, 1721, Charles Vane was hanged. He showed no remorse, no fear, not even a flicker of regret. His body was left hanging at the entrance of Port Royal, a grim warning to any who would follow his bloody path. Charles Vane was a storm, wild and uncontrollable. But all storms pass, leaving only wreckage behind. His legacy is not of treasure or triumph, but of madness, cruelty, and betrayal. In the end, even the sea he loved so much cast him aside. Henry Morgan is a name that might be familiar to you, thanks to the rum bearing his name on its label. However, This man was much more than just a figure in advertising campaigns. He was one of the most famous pirates of the 17th century, renowned not only for his maritime raids, but also for a complicated history that continues to be a subject of research even today. The name Henry Morgan only became widely known in the 40s of the 20th century, when the Seagram Company chose him for its rum. The label depicted a tall man in a red coat, smiling and standing on a barrel, with a pirate ship in the background. Although this image became synonymous with the cheerful, carefree pirate, the real Morgan had a much more complex life, filled with struggles, betrayals, and remarkable transformations. Unlike fictional characters like Superman, Henry Morgan was a real person who became an English admiral and governor of Jamaica. He was born in Scotland in 1635 into a family of landowners. His childhood was shrouded in mystery. Some sources claim he was kidnapped and sold into slavery, while others suggest he ran away from home and ended up in Barbados, from where he later went to Jamaica. Regardless, his path to piracy was not straightforward, but these events left a deep mark on his future career. The first records of Morgan appear in historical sources in the book by Olivier Exquemelin, written after Morgan had already gained fame. Exquemelin, a pirate and also a doctor, claimed to have personally witnessed many events involving Morgan, but his stories of pirate atrocities led Morgan to sue him for slander. Morgan denied all allegations of cruelty and kidnapping, even winning the case, which confirmed his innocence. It is known that Morgan began his pirate activities in his youth, launching raids on Spanish colonies in the Caribbean. His first major success came in the year 1616, when he captured Portobello, an important port in Panama. During this raid, he proved not only to be a ruthless plunderer, but also a strategist, as his crew successfully took over the city and forced local officials to pay a ransom for the pirates to leave. This moment marked a turning point in Morgan's career, as his reputation grew and he gained popularity among other pirates. Next came an even bolder attack on the city of Maracaibo in 1619, where his fleet carried out a risky naval operation. After this, Morgan launched another major raid on Panama in 1671. However, this last raid ended unexpectedly. During the assault on the city, a fire broke out, leaving the pirates without their loot. Morgan found himself in a difficult situation when his men began to mutiny over the lack of treasure, which soured his relationships with his subordinates. Interestingly, at that time, England and Spain had signed a peace treaty, and Morgan's activities began to come under suspicion by the royal authorities. After one of his raids, Morgan was arrested, and his fleet returned to Jamaica. However, due to his popularity, he received the blessing of King Charles II, who knighted him and even appointed him governor of Jamaica. This was a major turning point in his career. From that moment, Morgan decided to leave his pirate past behind and led a more peaceful life, focusing on plantations and politics. He became a model governor, but his health had already been undermined. in the year 1688, a few years after he retired from piracy, Henry Morgan died. His death was caused by diseases brought on by alcoholism. Leaving his mark in history, Henry Morgan became not only one of the greatest pirates of his time, but also a symbol of an era when piracy was not just robbery, but a significant part of the larger political game. He even had many admirers in England, where, after his death, he became an object of fascination, and even called upon spirits to learn his future through the medium Florence Cook. Morgan, despite leaving behind his pirate fame, became a symbol of how history can be rewritten for the sake of glory and advantage, and how ordinary people, capable of great deeds, sometimes leave their mark in legends that live on long after their death. Bartholomew Roberts, known to the world as Black Bart, was born in May of the year 1682 in the rugged coastal region of Pembrokeshire, Wales. From these windswept cliffs and stormy seas, no one would have predicted that young John Roberts, as he was then known, would rise to become one of the most feared and successful pirates in history, seizing over 470 ships across the Atlantic and the Caribbean. Life in Pembrokeshire was harsh, especially for John's family. His father, George Roberts, was a struggling laborer with little hope of prosperity. The cold reality of poverty gnawed at young John, who watched his father's endless toil lead only to hardship. Determined to avoid such a fate, John set his sights on the sea, that vast, wild frontier where fortunes could be won by those bold enough to take them. At the age of 13, John stepped aboard a merchant ship as a lowly cabin boy. He learned the hard ways of the ocean, how the waves could rage and the wind could wail, but also how a clever navigator could dance between them. For over 2 decades, he served aboard various vessels, moving from ship to ship, honing his skills as a sailor. Yet his life remained ordinary, a blur of rough voyages and hard labor. There are no clear records of his adventures during those years, but by 1718, he had become the 3rd mate of a slave ship named the Princess, a vessel that sailed from London under the command of Captain Abraham Plum. It was off the coast of West Africa in the summer of 1719 that destiny came thundering into John's life. The Princess lay anchored near the shores of Ghana when a dark shadow appeared on the horizon. 2 pirate ships, the Royal Rover and the St. James, both under the command of Howell Davis, a cunning and ambitious pirate captain. The pirates attacked, boarding the Princess with the brutal efficiency of wolves among sheep. The crew was given a cruel choice: join the pirates or die. John Roberts, who had seen enough of hardship and servitude, chose to live. The young sailor became a pirate. Howell Davis soon recognized something special in his new recruit. John, now called Bartholomew Roberts, was more than just another sailor. He was an exceptional navigator, and Davis, a fellow Welshman, quickly made him his trusted advisor. The 2 men shared a kindred spirit, a hunger for adventure, and the desire to carve their names into the annals of history. Davis even confided secrets to Roberts that were hidden from the rest of the crew. Under Davis's mentorship, Roberts learned not only the art of navigation, but also the cruel, bloody trade of piracy. But Howell Davis's daring eventually led to his demise. In an audacious plot to kidnap the governor of the island of Principe under the guise of a grand banquet, he was ambushed and shot dead. The pirates were thrown into chaos. The governor believed that with Davis dead, the pirates would surrender. He did not know these men. Aboard the Royal Rover, the crew gathered to choose a new captain. Their system of governance was a strange reflection of England's own parliament, where the crew was divided into lords and commons. The lords, the most seasoned and respected pirates, had the final say. The choice was unusual but unanimous. Bartholomew Roberts. He had been with the pirates for barely 6 weeks, but his skill and confidence had already earned their admiration. Tall, strong, and sharp-witted, Roberts was the image of a pirate leader. Overwhelmed by this unexpected rise, he decided to take on a new name, Bartholomew, honoring the legendary buccaneer Bartholomew Sharp. But among the crew, he soon became known by a simpler, more fearsome title, Black Bart, for his long, wild, raven-black hair. Black Bart's first command as captain was a call for vengeance. The governor of Principe, whose treachery had killed Davis, would pay dearly. The Royal Rover surged forward under full sail, its cannons roaring. The fort at Principe was engulfed in flames. The city's defenders scattered, and the screams of the dying echoed across the harbor. The message was clear. None who crossed Black Bart would live to boast of it. But revenge was not enough. Black Bart was a man of vision. He steered the Royal Rover across the seas in search of riches. In a bold encounter off the coast of Brazil, he discovered a fleet of 44 Portuguese ships, 42 merchant vessels, and 2 heavily armed frigates. Most men would have hesitated, but not Black Bart. With fearsome speed, he led his crew straight into the heart of the enemy. The pirates overwhelmed one of the merchant ships, a sleek 10-gun sloop, and found a treasure of 30,000 gold coins and precious cargo. Triumphant, but never complacent, Black Bart continued his relentless pursuit of fortune. Yet treachery awaited him. Walter Kennedy, his trusted first mate, betrayed him. While Roberts led an attack on a Portuguese ship, Kennedy seized the Royal Rover and fled, taking the lion's share of the loot. Black Bart was left with his new prize, a sturdy sloop, which he renamed Fortune. Undaunted, he raised the black flag once more and carved his name across the waves. The next few years saw Black Bart's legend grow to staggering heights. From the Caribbean to the coast of West Africa, his black flag became a symbol of terror. In Newfoundland, his Fortune seized 26 ships and 150 fishing boats, his men setting fire to coastal settlements for sport. He captured a French frigate with 28 cannons, christening it the Royal Fortune. His crew swelled with new recruits, many joining willingly, enchanted by the promise of gold and freedom. Yet even among pirates, life was brutal. Those who failed Roberts's strict code of discipline, were flogged or hanged without mercy. His hatred for the French was particularly infamous. French captives were often tortured or killed, a grim testament to his ruthlessness. Black Bart's ambition knew no bounds. In 1721, he set his sights on Africa. His fleet stormed the slave coast, burning ships that refused to pay ransom and seizing others as prizes. In a stroke of fortune, he captured a magnificent 50-gun French frigate, which became his new flagship, the Royal Fortune. But victory bred dissent. One of his lieutenants, Thomas Anstey, who had once served under Howell Davis, grew resentful and led a mutiny, stealing away with a prize ship and a portion of the treasure. Despite this betrayal, Black Bart pressed on, plundering ship after ship along the West African coast. His name struck terror wherever his sails appeared. But fate's wheel was turning. In early 1722, two British warships, the Swallow and the Weymouth, set out to hunt him down. In February of that year, the Swallow caught up with his fleet near Cape Lopez. In a fierce cannonade, Black Bart was struck down, a blast of grape shot ending his legendary life. True to his wishes, his men threw his body overboard, denying his enemies the prize of his corpse. Leaderless, his fleet crumbled. The remaining pirates were captured, many hanged and a few pardoned. Thus ended the saga of Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts, the pirate king whose banner of terror had flown over 470 ships. His story became a legend, an immortal tale of courage, treachery, and the price of ambition. The wind swept across the deck of the grand ship, its white sails billowing against the vast blue sky. Sir Francis Drake stood at the helm, his sharp eyes fixed on the endless horizon. Beneath his feet, the deck of the Golden Hind creaked and groaned with the gentle sway of the sea. But this ship was more than just wood and canvas. It was a symbol, a vessel of destiny, a name that would soon become legend. Drake's journey had not begun like that of other seafarers. He did not seize a captured ship to begin his voyage. No, he had something grander in mind. With a vision as vast as the ocean itself, he commissioned the construction of a ship, a mighty galleon designed to his exact specifications. It was first christened the Pelican, but soon, as if shedding its skin to reveal its true self, it transformed into the Golden Hind. This ship would not only carry Drake across the world, but would also inscribe his name in the annals of history. In the year 1577, Drake and his fearless crew set sail on a journey that few had ever dared to undertake. Their destination was the unknown, their mission to circumnavigate the globe. Only one had done it before them, the great Ferdinand Magellan. Yet, unlike the ill-fated Magellan, Drake's voyage would end not in tragedy, but in triumph. For 3 years, from 1577 to 1580, the Golden Hind carved a path across uncharted waters, dodging storms, battling fierce waves, and outmaneuvering the Spanish galleons that sought to bring her down. And what a journey it was! Drake's ship slipped past the treacherous cliffs of the Strait of Magellan. Its narrow, twisting waters like a labyrinth of death. Yet the Golden Hind emerged, its sails filled with the winds of the open Pacific. Here the galleon became a phantom, striking fear into the hearts of Spanish merchants. Drake was no mere pirate. He was a privateer, a royal corsair, carrying with him the silent blessing of Queen Elizabeth I. For England's enemies, he was a terror, a wolf of the seas. For his queen, he was a hero. The Spaniards cursed his name, for wherever their treasure-laden ships sailed, there was Drake. His men struck with the speed of a thunderbolt. They seized gold, silver, precious stones, and spices. Yet Drake's greatest prizes were not only in gold, but in knowledge. His keen mind saw beyond mere plunder. He knew that maps were the key to power. Each captured vessel surrendered not only its cargo, but also its secrets, carefully charted maps of Spanish waters and colonies, and most crucial of all, their precious compasses. In an age when the sea was a vast, merciless wilderness, good maps and reliable compasses were worth more than any treasure. The Spanish maps were a treasure chest of hidden coasts, safe harbors, and secret sea routes. And the compasses, rare and finely crafted, were a sailor's true guide through darkness and storms. Drake hoarded these with a zeal that matched his hunger for silver and gold. Ships he captured would be left adrift, their crews spared but lost, for without their maps and compasses, they were like blind men in a forest. And there was another reason why Drake's Golden Hind became the terror of the Spanish Main. Unlike many captains who ruled their ships with an iron fist, Drake understood the strength of unity. His men followed him not out of fear, but out of loyalty. They knew that while he was fierce in battle, he was fair in reward. He shared the spoils of victory with them, ensuring that each sailor had a stake in the success of the voyage. When Drake finally returned to England in the year 1580, his ship's hold was filled with unimaginable wealth. A bounty worth £2,250,000 sterling, an unimaginable fortune at the time. Half of this vast treasure went directly to Queen Elizabeth, who was so delighted that she ordered a grand ceremony. There, on the deck of the Golden Hind, she drew her sword, and in the sight of his triumphant crew, she knighted him. Sir Francis Drake. His name now echoed not only across the seas, but across the courts of Europe. But Drake was not just a captain. He was a weapon, a living symbol of England's rise. As Spain's mighty armada cast its shadow over Europe, Drake's cunning and courage became England's shield. When the invincible armada sailed in 1588, determined to crush England, Drake stood among the first to strike. With fire ships, swift galleons, and unbreakable will, he and his fellow captains shattered Spain's pride. Yet Drake's life was not merely a tale of battles and treasure. He was a man of the sea, a master of navigation, and a student of the stars. On his voyages, he learned not only the ways of the winds and the tides, but also the mysteries of the heavens. He was a sailor who understood that true power lay not just in steel and powder, but in knowledge. His mastery of navigation was unparalleled. His Golden Hind was not only a warship, but a floating workshop of scientific discovery. Among his most prized possessions were his instruments: the astrolabe for measuring the height of stars, the Jacob's staff for calculating latitude, and the cherished marine compasses that guided his course. His ship was a fortress of knowledge, an ark of wisdom amid the wild seas. Even in his later years, when many would have sought peace and rest, Drake remained a man of action. In the year 1595, as illness began to claim his once strong body, he found himself again at sea, leading an expedition against Spain's colonies in the Caribbean. But this time, fortune had turned against him. Fever struck him, and the mighty Sir Francis Drake, who had faced storms, cannonballs, and the hatred of kings, met his end not in a blaze of glory, but in a quiet cabin, surrounded by his loyal men. In his final moments, the sea whispered to him through the creaking timbers of his ship, a lullaby for a weary soul. His body, wrapped in a shroud, was given to the waves off the coast of Panama, claimed by the same ocean that had been both his greatest love and his fiercest enemy. Yet the story of Sir Francis Drake did not end with his death. His name lived on, carried by the winds that swept across the world's oceans, whispered in the halls of royal courts, and inscribed on the maps of sailors who feared and revered him. The Straits of Drake at the southern tip of South America bear his name, a testament to his courage and vision. His beloved Golden Hind, though it would eventually decay and sink into the mud of a quiet English harbor, has been reborn again and again in the form of faithful replicas. Even today, her proud sails catch the wind, and her decks echo with the ghostly laughter of Drake's fearless crew. Sir Francis Drake, the man who chased the horizon and captured the world, the privateer who rose from humble beginnings to kneel before a queen, his legend sails on, forever part of the boundless, restless sea. Mary Read was born in London, the daughter of a sailor whose life ended in distant and unknown lands. Her mother, after her husband's death, had a brief, unsuccessful marriage, resulting in the birth of a son. Unfortunately, the boy passed away early, and Mary's mother was left alone, pregnant again and not wanting to tarnish her reputation. She decided to flee to a secluded village where she lived for several years, hiding from the world. Once her savings were exhausted, Mary's mother decided to return to her mother-in-law, suspecting that she could offer some support. To avoid questions about the newly born girl, she dressed Mary as a boy and passed her off as the son who had died long ago. The grandmother, happy to have a child to care for, generously provided a small allowance for their upkeep. Mary's mother continued to raise her as a boy, explaining the secret of her disguise when she was old enough to understand. However, after a time, the grandmother passed away, and Mary and her mother found themselves facing severe poverty. At the age of 15, Mary decided to leave for Flanders, where, still dressed as a boy and adopting the name Mark, she joined an infantry regiment as a cadet. Though she displayed exceptional courage in battle, she was unable to rise in rank. Frustrated, she left the infantry and joined the cavalry. where she quickly proved herself in several remarkable operations, earning the respect of all her fellow officers. During this time, Mary fell in love with a young cavalryman. After the secret of her true identity was revealed, the two married. Their life together seemed promising, and they opened a tavern called Three Horseshoes, with steady clientele from the nearby garrison. But this period of peace was short-lived. Mary's husband passed away, and the regiment was moved to another location, leaving her without a steady income. Mary returned to the infantry, but with no military conflict to fight in. She joined a Dutch ship bound for the West Indies. The Dutch vessel was soon captured by English pirates, and as Mary was English, she decided to join their ranks. Although the royal amnesty offered her a chance to return to a peaceful life, she was soon left without money once again and turned to piracy to make ends meet. Woodes Rogers, a notable figure in the British Navy, was preparing an expedition against the Spanish, and Mary joined the mission. As the ship sailed, the crew mutinied and overthrew the captain, and Mary found herself back in her original role, living the pirate life. It was during this time that she met Bonny, the wife of pirate Captain John Rackham. The two women struck up a strong friendship when Mary revealed her true identity. They sailed together for months, and during this time, Mary developed feelings for one of the sailors who had been forced into piracy. She saved his life in a duel against another pirate who had insulted him, and the sailor, grateful for her actions, soon married her according to the laws of the sea. In October of 1720, Mary, Anne, and Rackham were captured by the governor of Jamaica, Robert Lowe. During the trial, both women claimed to be pregnant, which delayed the verdict. But while waiting in prison, Mary fell ill with a fever and tragically passed away before her sentence could be carried out. Benjamin Hornigold is one of the most famous pirates of the 18th century, whose name became synonymous with both piracy and the complex world of privateering. His journey into the world of piracy was brief, but intense, and it is marked by his eventual transition from being a feared pirate to a hunter of his former comrades. Unfortunately, much of Hornigold's early life remains shrouded in mystery. It is believed that he was born in the northern part of England, in Norfolk, and that he first set sail aboard ships based in ports like King's Lynn and Great Yarmouth. It was during these early years at sea that he crossed paths with the notorious Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. In fact, when Hornigold took command of a new ship, the Ranger, he entrusted the leadership of his former sloop to Teach, who would go on to become one of the most feared pirates in history. Together, Hornigold and Teach were a formidable pair, capturing several large merchant vessels carrying valuable cargoes of wheat flour and alcoholic beverages in the year 1717. That same year, Hornigold's ship made a daring attack on a vessel belonging to the governor of South Carolina, whose mission was to hunt down pirates. With a crew that had swelled to more than 350 men, Hornigold's raids continued, and the number of his victories grew by the day. However, despite his success, Hornigold remained cautious and adhered to a code that set him apart from many of his fellow pirates. Unlike others, he never attacked British ships, and he was known to be unusually lenient with captured crews, even treating them with respect. This cautious approach caused tensions within his crew, especially when Hornigold refused to attack a British ship once again. In response, his crew mutinied, and Hornigold lost his position as captain, although he continued to raid the seas aboard a smaller sloop. The landscape of piracy began to change in 1718, when a proclamation was issued offering amnesty to all pirates who agreed to abandon their criminal ways. Hornigold was quick to take advantage of this offer, and he turned his efforts to hunting down the very pirates he had once sailed with. Among those he pursued was his former associate, Blackbeard himself, as well as other infamous pirates like Charles Vane and Jack Rackham. Despite his newfound role as a pirate hunter, Hornigold's life would come to a tragic end at sea. In 1719, during a violent storm, his ship ran aground on a reef, leading to his untimely death. Historian Charles Johnson, who wrote extensively about pirates, referred to Hornigold as one of the most famous pirates of his time, placing his name alongside that of Blackbeard and Sir Francis Drake. Hornigold's story, with its dramatic rise and fall, has inspired numerous films and books about the golden age of piracy. Although Hornigold failed to capture Blackbeard, Charles Vane, or Jack Rackham, he was still recognized for his contributions to the crown. Governor Woodes Rogers, who was keen on eliminating piracy in the Caribbean, took note of Hornigold's adherence to the law and his shift from pirate to privateer. Witnesses confirmed that he did not attack English ships, and Hornigold's dedication to serving the crown was officially acknowledged in a detailed report sent to the London Chamber of Commerce. This report led to his official pardon, and from that moment on, Benjamin Hornigold was absolved of his pirate past, clean before both the law and the king. With his pirate career behind him, Hornigold formed an unlikely friendship with Governor Rogers, eventually serving as a protector of convoys and the coastline. It was a far cry from the days of daring pirate raids, but it was a life that reflected the changes in Hornigold's character. He had gone from being one of the most feared pirates on the high seas to a man in service of the crown, a symbol of the complex and often contradictory nature of the pirate world. In the end, Benjamin Hornigold remains in our memory as a pirate who knew when to get out. He successfully navigated the transition from outlaw to loyal servant of the crown, but he also failed to catch his former comrades. He was a man who, in a world where breaking the law was often the norm, chose to respect it and even risked his life for a simple reason: to procure a new hat. The Caribbean Sea stretched endlessly under a scorching sun, its waves shimmering like molten silver. The wind was fierce, tearing through the sails of the pirate ship Ranger, and on its deck a storm brewed among the men. For months they had plundered merchant ships, their reputation as ruthless pirates spreading across the turquoise waters. But beneath the black flag and the salt-ridden wood, discontent simmered. At the heart of the crew's growing frustration was Captain Charles Vane, a man who commanded with a heavy hand but lacked the courage his men craved. His face, weathered by the sea, was a mask of bitterness and stubborn pride. The final straw came on a day when a French warship appeared on the horizon, its sleek, cannon-laden hull promising gold and glory. The crew was ready, blades sharpened, guns loaded, but Vane ordered retreat. The crews, grumbling, turned to open defiance. As the ship rocked gently in the Caribbean waves, the voices of 76 men rose against Vane's, their anger crashing like the sea against the hull. And at the center of the uproar stood Jack Rackham, lean, sharp-eyed, with a smirk that was both charming and dangerous. His voice, sharp and confident, cut through the chaos. This ship needs a captain with fire in his blood, not fear in his bones, Jack declared, his gaze locking onto Vane's. The crew cheered, and the vote was cast, 76 voices for Jack, a mere 15 for Vane. Jack Rackham, known as Calico Jack for his brightly colored clothes, became captain, while Vane was cast away with a few loyal followers. Calico Jack's first weeks as captain were a hurricane of success. Merchant ships fell to his cunning, their holds emptied into his own. His cunning was not just in battle, but in strategy. He knew when to strike and when to fade into the mist. But his meteoric rise met an equally swift setback. Off the coast of Jamaica, his hunger for plunder led him too close to the port. His men were still cheering, drunk on stolen rum and victory, when the distant silhouettes of government ships appeared against the sunlit horizon. Panic swept the deck. Orders were shouted, sails were hoisted, but the wind seemed to turn against them. The hunter ships closed in like wolves. A volley of cannon fire tore through the Ranger's sails, and soon Jack's men were fighting for their lives. The sea boiled with splinters and smoke, but Jack, ever the sly fox, led his men in a daring escape. They lost their ship, but not their lives, and with a ragtag group of survivors, Jack slipped away into the chaos of Nassau. Nassau, the pirate capital, a lawless den of scoundrels and dreamers, where a man could hide, plan, and even be forgiven. Here, the notorious pirate Governor Woodes Rogers offered a lifeline, a royal pardon. Jack, with his crew by his side, stood before Rogers. His face was the perfect mask of regret, his voice a smooth concoction of truth and lies. "We were forced into piracy, Governor, by that tyrant Charles Vane," Jack claimed, and Rogers, eager to end the era of piracy without further bloodshed, believed him. For a time, Jack and his men tried to live as honest men, but the sea was in their blood, and Nassau was a place where temptation lurked at every corner. Among the crowds of the bustling port, Jack's eyes met those of a fiery-haired woman, Bonny. Her sharp green eyes sparked with defiance. Her laughter was a storm, and Jack was caught in it. Anne was married, yes, but her heart was a tempest, and soon it belonged to Jack. Their love was wild, reckless, and dangerous. Anne, dressed in men's clothes, roamed the taverns and docks, her dagger as sharp as her wit. Jack's passion for her became his downfall. When Governor Rogers refused to annul her marriage, Jack did what any pirate at heart would do. He stole a ship, gathered his crew, and fled with Anne at his side. Yet the most remarkable part of Jack's crew was not just his fierce lover. Among his men walked another woman disguised in men's clothes, Mary Read. Mary had lived a life of deceit, raised as a boy by her mother to claim an inheritance. She fought as a soldier, loved as a woman, and when fate led her aboard Jack's ship, she cast aside her disguise, revealing her truth to Anne, who welcomed her as a sister. Together they were a force of nature, Anne wild and bold, and Mary fierce and disciplined. For months the trio terrorized the Caribbean, their ship a shadow on the waves, their laughter carried on the wind. But fate was a cruel mistress. In the fall of the year 1720, Governor Rogers sent his most feared pirate hunter, Jonathan Barnett, to end Jack's defiance. Barnett's ships found Jack's anchored in the dark waters of Bry Harbor, Jamaica. The battle was brief but brutal. Jack's men, drunk and stumbling, were easy prey. Only Anne and Mary fought with the fury of demons, their pistols blazing, their swords singing. But 2 against dozens was a hopeless fight. The pirate hunters overwhelmed them, dragging Jack, Anne, Mary, and the rest of the crew in chains to Spanish Town. Before the court, Jack stood pale and silent. Anne's eyes burned with anger, and as Jack was led away, she spat bitterly. "If you had fought like a man, you wouldn't be dying like a dog." Her words struck Jack like a dagger. The men of the crew were sentenced to hang. Jack met his end on a gray November morning, the noose scratching his sunburnt neck. His eyes searched the crowd, perhaps for a flash of red hair or a familiar face, but he saw only cold, indifferent strangers. The trapdoor opened, and Calico Jack swung, his legacy left to the waves and whispered legends. Anne and Mary, facing the same fate, claimed to be pregnant, the one plea that could spare them. Mary's life ended in the darkness of a prison cell, claimed by fever. What became of Anne is a tale lost to time. Some say she escaped, others that she found a quiet life far from the blood-soaked shores of the Caribbean. But on stormy nights, when the wind howls over the Caribbean Sea, sailors speak of a ghostly ship with tattered black sails and 2 fierce women standing side by side on the deck, their laughter mingling with the thunder. William Kidd, one of the most famous pirates in history, is known not only for his pirate adventures, but also for the strange and bizarre legal case that followed him. His execution turned him into a legend, with the story of his death taking an unexpected twist. The first time Kidd was hanged, the rope broke, and he had to be hanged again. After his death, his body was placed in an iron cage, where it hung for 23 years, serving as a warning to other would-be pirates. For over 200 years, treasure hunters have relentlessly searched for Captain Kidd's buried treasure, though it may have never existed at all. Like many pirate stories, very little is known about Kidd's early life. What we do know is that he was born in Scotland, though details of his childhood remain a mystery. His first mention in historical records places him among the survivors of a shipwreck off the coast of Haiti. Kidd then joined the crew of Jean Sharpen, a privateer, who had been entrusted with an expedition to attack an English colony on St. Christopher, while Captain Jacques Fontaine and his crew of 120 men stormed St. Christopher. Kidd and his men waited in the harbor of Basse-Terre. During the night, they ambushed a group of sleeping French sailors, cut their throats, and took their ship. The English pirates elected Kidd as captain and renamed the vessel Blessed William. In 1696, Kidd, supported by a group of influential English officials, was given a new ship called Adventure, a privateering commission, and orders to attack pirate vessels in the Indian Ocean. However, Kidd's new crew, hired in London, was lacking experienced sailors. To fill the gaps, he stopped in New York, where he recruited more crew members. The sailors were promised a share of the loot, as was customary in piracy. However, Kidd was cautious in his actions, and for nearly an entire year, the crew captured no ships. This lack of success led to growing frustration among the crew, and soon, whispers of mutiny began to circulate. Then, on the horizon, appeared a Dutch ship, and the crew demanded that Kidd attack. In the ensuing battle, Kidd killed the leader of the mutineers, and after dividing the loot, punished the other ringleaders. Despite this, Kidd's cautious approach continued, which only fueled further discontent among the crew. One day, Kidd and his crew managed to capture a French ship, the Rupert. They sailed it to Madagascar, where the crew received their share of the spoils, and Kidd left the most rebellious of the mutineers behind on the captured vessel. However, despite this, mutinous feelings continued to grow among the remaining crew, who demanded more decisive action. It was then that the Adventure encountered the Quetta Merchant, an Indian ship carrying French goods. This gave Kidd a legitimate reason to seize the vessel. As fate would have it, Kidd also encountered the Rupert again, now under the control of the mutineers, who had captured 2 English ships. These mutineers joined forces with their former comrades, and Kidd narrowly escaped aboard the Quetta Merchant. By April, Kidd arrived in an English port and learned that King William III had revoked his privateering commission and issued a warrant for his arrest. Hoping for mercy from his powerful patrons, Kidd voluntarily surrendered to the authorities. He had kept detailed records of all the ships he had captured, and so, with little fear, he awaited trial. But his influential supporters abandoned him, leaving him to face a lengthy and scandalous legal battle. Eventually, Kidd was convicted and sentenced to death. Legends about Captain Kidd's exploits filled the public imagination, and many stories spread about his ruthless behavior. Some claimed that over the course of several years, Kidd had sunk hundreds of merchant ships, with their crews being killed, mutilated, or hanged. It was said that the treasures from these ships were locked away in Kidd's chest, and that any crew member who even hinted at wanting their share of the loot disappeared without a trace. Another version of the story was that Kidd buried his treasure on the so-called Skeleton Island. According to this legend, after Kidd and his pirate crew buried their loot, he killed every last one of his men, leaving their bodies as markers to guide him back to the treasure. This popular version of events is found in Robert Louis Stevenson's novel Treasure Island. In a letter to Lord Bellamont, seeking clemency, Kidd mentioned the treasure and offered to exchange the location of his hidden chest for a pardon. It is possible that Kidd did indeed hide a small portion of his treasure on an island in the Indian Ocean. But the true extent of his riches was likely far less than the stories suggest. Nonetheless, rumors of his treasure continue to circulate, and for over 2 centuries, treasure hunters have searched for the island where Captain William Kidd supposedly buried his gold. Despite numerous attempts, no one has ever found it, and whether or not Kidd's treasure exists remains one of the most enduring mysteries in pirate lore. The wind howled like a vengeful spirit over the churning waters, and the mighty Whydah struggled against the fury of the storm. The ship's timbers groaned beneath the weight of the waves, and lightning ripped the heavens apart, casting brief, ghastly light over the terrified faces of the crew. At the helm stood Samuel Bellamy, known across the Atlantic as Black Sam, his long, raven-black hair whipping wildly in the wind, untouched by the captain's usual fine powder. His jaw clenched, his eyes focused, and his voice rang clear above the chaos. "Hold fast, men! She's not bested us yet!" he roared, his voice a beacon of courage in the midst of darkness. But even the bravest captain cannot bend the will of the sea. As the monstrous waves rose like mountains and crashed down upon the ship, the Whydah, once the pride of the pirate fleet, was swallowed by the furious depths. Yet this was not where the tale of Samuel Bellamy began. It was in a quiet, mist-shrouded village called Hiddesley, nestled in the county of Devonshire, England, where his story truly started. He was born to Stephen and Elizabeth Bellamy, the youngest of their 6 children. His arrival into the world was marked by tragedy. His mother, Elizabeth, passed away in the struggle to bring him to life. She was laid to rest on a cold February morning, and young Samuel was baptized just 3 weeks later. Raised by his father, who struggled to provide for his large family, Samuel was no stranger to hardship. Life in Devonshire was harsh, and like his siblings, Samuel began working at an early age. Yet, where others saw only the narrow path of toil and struggle, young Samuel's sharp eyes turned to the distant sea, a promise of freedom and fortune. His first taste of the ocean came as a deckhand on a trading ship. Despite his youth, Samuel carried himself with the determination of a grown man, hardened by years of early labor. It was during one of these voyages that fate led his ship to the rugged shores of Cape Cod. There, on the misty headland, he met the young and beautiful Maria Halla of Eastham. Her dark eyes and gentle smile ensnared his heart, and it was not long before the two became inseparable. Tall, handsome, and with a wild mane of jet-black hair, Sam was the image of a dashing adventurer. His charm was undeniable, and though Maria's parents were fond of him, they dreamed of a wealthier match for their daughter. Sam's love for Maria fueled his ambition. He was determined to earn enough wealth to give her a life of comfort. And so, alongside his loyal friend Palgrave Polly Williams, they set out in search of fortune. Their first venture was a search for sunken treasures along the coast of Florida, where the wrecks of Spanish galleons were rumored to be brimming with gold. But the ocean was a cruel and indifferent master, and their dreams of easy riches soon dissolved in the briny depths. Hungry and desperate, there remained only one path, the black flag of piracy. In the year 1716, fate smiled upon Sam Bellamy once more. He and Polly found themselves aboard the pirate ship Marion, under the command of the famed English pirate Benjamin Hornigold and his fierce partner, Edward Teach, a man who would one day become infamous as Blackbeard. Hornigold was a cautious captain, refusing to attack British ships due to a secret loyalty to the English crown, which allowed pirates to hunt Spanish galleons with impunity. But Samuel Bellamy was young, bold, and hungry for plunder. Frustrated by Hornigold's restraint, he spoke openly of his desire to seize any ship that crossed their path, and his defiance won the hearts of the restless crew. Even Edward Teach supported his view, though he remained a silent observer for now. The crew's loyalties soon shifted, and in a decisive moment they cast their vote. Hornigold was overthrown without bloodshed, a rare mercy in the ruthless world of piracy. And Bellamy, who still held a measure of respect for the older captain, allowed him to leave aboard the Ranger with a small band of loyalists. Teach, ever the opportunist, seized one of Hornigold's ships for himself, while Bellamy was named captain of the Marion. From that moment, Samuel Bellamy's rise was meteoric. As captain, he led his men with a rare blend of courage and compassion. Their first great prize came swiftly, the Sultan, a sloop that surrendered without a fight. Impressed by its speed and firepower, Bellamy made it his flagship, while Polly Williams was given command of the Marion. Under Bellamy's leadership, the crew soon earned a fearsome reputation, capturing nearly 50 ships in less than a year. They called themselves the Robin Hood's Men, for they believed they were merely taking from the wealthy to support their own. Samuel Bellamy was unlike most pirates. He was a man of principles, showing mercy to his captives and often inviting skilled sailors to join his crew. Those who refused were released unharmed, a gesture of honor that earned him respect even among his enemies. His crew was a diverse brotherhood, where black sailors fought alongside white, sharing plunder and risking their lives together, a rare sight in those harsh times. But Bellamy's greatest prize was yet to come. The Widow, an 18-gun, 3-masted English slave ship, laden with ivory, sugar, quinine, indigo, and over 4.5 tons of silver and gold. It was a treasure beyond imagining. The Widow surrendered to Bellamy without a fierce fight, and he immediately made it his new flagship, strengthening its armament and sending the Sultan away under the command of its original captain, who sailed home a little poorer but alive. Bellamy's fortune grew to legendary heights, and as the hold of the widow filled with treasure, he made a decision. It was time to return to New England, to Maria, to a life of peace. The crew agreed. They were rich beyond their wildest dreams. But the sea had other plans. As the widow approached the shores of Cape Cod, a fierce storm descended upon them. The ship, burdened by its weight of treasure, was unable to escape the savage waves. Despite Bellamy's desperate orders, the widow was hurled onto the sandbars and shattered. Of the 145 souls aboard, only 2 survived: the ship's carpenter, Tom Davis, and a young Mosquito Indian named John Julian. Samuel Bellamy, the Prince of Pirates, was lost to the depths, but his legend lived on. In the year 1984, treasure hunter Barry Clifford uncovered the wreck of the widow off the coast of Cape Cod. His divers brought to light gold coins, weapons, and the ship's bell, silent witnesses to the daring life of Samuel Bellamy, the boldest buccaneer of them all. Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, was born in the bustling English port city of Bristol. His early years at sea were marked by raids on French and Spanish ships in the waters around Jamaica during the War of the Spanish Succession, which raged from 1701 to 1714. The name Edward Teach may have been an alias, a shadow to obscure a darker past. Some accounts even mention names like Edward Thatch or Thatch Drummond. But whether these were his real names or just other disguises remains a mystery. By September of 1717, Teach had taken up a prominent position among the pirates of the Bahamas, serving as captain under the infamous British pirate Benjamin Hornigold. Their base of operations, like that of so many other freebooters of the era, was New Providence Island. Commanding his own ship, Teach sailed alongside Hornigold, preying upon vessels in the Caribbean and along the coasts of North America. But his most infamous conquest came in November of 1717, when his crew captured a French frigate named the Concorde, a treasure-laden prize bound for Martinique. The Concorde carried a king's ransom in gold, coins, gemstones, and other valuable goods from African trading posts. Teach seized this ship and renamed it Queen Anne's Revenge, a fearsome vessel that soon became a legendary predator of the seas. He armed the ship with 40 cannons, giving it a firepower that rivaled many naval warships of the day. With this new flagship, Teach prowled the waters around St. Vincent and St. Kitts, striking terror wherever he sailed. By early 1718, Teach's crew had grown to an astounding 300 to 400 men, a small floating army loyal to their fearsome captain. Teach himself was a giant of a man, and his appearance was nothing short of terrifying. His thick, coal-black beard, twisted into braids and tied with dark ribbons, became his signature look. In battle, he would often light slow-burning fuses tucked beneath his hat, causing smoke to curl around his face and making him appear like a demon emerging from the depths of hell. His flag, a dark symbol meant to strike fear, showed a skeletal figure holding an hourglass in one hand and a spear aimed at a bleeding heart in the other, a grim reminder that those who resisted him faced death. Under Teach's command, his crew maintained a strict code of discipline. While many saw pirates as lawless brigands, Teach enforced order on his ship. His flag was a warning, but his reputation did much of the work. Tales of his ruthlessness spread far and wide. One of his most infamous tactics was to deprive captured ships of their navigational tools, maps and compasses, before letting them sail away, leaving their captains to navigate blindly. After a string of successful raids, Teach sailed to North Carolina, where he sought a pardon from Governor Charles Eden. The governor, like many colonial officials along the American coast, saw piracy as a profitable enterprise. Some turned a blind eye to pirate activities because the goods they sold were cheaper than those from legal merchants. Teach swore to leave piracy behind, and Eden granted him a pardon, but it was little more than a thin charade. By March of 1718, Teach sent Queen Anne's Revenge to Honduras Bay, where it captured a vessel commanded by the pirate Steed Bonnet. The ship became part of Teach's growing fleet, which soon numbered 4 vessels. His raids continued, and in May of that same year, he orchestrated a daring blockade of Charlestown in South Carolina. For 2 weeks, Teach's fleet held the port hostage, capturing at least 8 ships and ransoming the lives of captured citizens for a chest of medicine. When his fleet sailed away, Teach's legend only grew. Yet even legends must sometimes falter. As his fleet sailed through the shallow waters of Beaufort Inlet, Queen Anne's Revenge and another ship ran aground. Some whispered that Teach had done this deliberately, a cunning plan to thin out his crew and keep a larger share of the spoils for himself. Bonnet was given back his ship, but Teach seized the fleet's treasure and slipped away on a sloop with only a few trusted men. In Bath Town, North Carolina, Governor Eden again granted Teach a pardon. Teach even married the 16-year-old daughter of a local plantation owner and settled into a comfortable home on Ocracoke Island. Yet his piratical nature could not be tamed. In time, he returned to his old ways, capturing 2 French ships near Bermuda and bringing their cargo of sugar and cocoa back to Bath. A small bribe of sugar to the governor ensured that the capture was ruled legal. The ships dismissed as derelicts that Teach had simply rescued. But not everyone was willing to tolerate his schemes. Governor Alexander Spotswood of Virginia, a staunch opponent of piracy, saw Teach as a dangerous criminal who had to be stopped. He sent a force of Royal Navy sailors, led by Lieutenant Robert Maynard, to hunt Teach down. They set sail in November of 1718, lured by a reward of £100 for capturing the pirate dead or alive. When Maynard's ships arrived at Ocracoke Inlet, Teach's crew was reduced to barely 20 men. On November 22nd, as Maynard's ship struck a sandbar, Teach opened fire with his cannons, declaring that there would be no mercy. One of the attackers was crippled by the bombardment, but Maynard's own sloop drifted close to Teach's ship. His men hid below deck, emerging only when Teach and his pirates climbed aboard, turning the battle into a chaotic melee. Teach and Maynard faced each other in brutal combat. Teach fought like a beast, shrugging off bullet wounds and slashes. At last he fell, his massive frame collapsing only after suffering 5 gunshots and 20 sword cuts. A Scottish sailor delivered the final blow, beheading the pirate. As local legend has it, Teach's headless body swam around the ship 3 times before sinking into the depths. Maynard fastened Teach's severed head to his ship's bow, a grisly trophy and a warning to all who might consider piracy. All but one of Teach's men were eventually hanged. His loyal lieutenant, Israel Hands, survived by testifying against corrupt officials in North Carolina. For all his fearsome reputation, Blackbeard's career was surprisingly brief, lasting just 15 months. He captured a mere 23 ships, a number dwarfed by the hundreds taken by the Welsh pirate Black Bart Roberts. And despite the legends of hidden treasures, there is no proof that Blackbeard ever buried any gold. Yet in death, Blackbeard became more powerful than ever. His dark legend was immortalized by Daniel Defoe in his work, A General History of the Pirates, where the pirate was painted as a monstrous figure of chaos and violence. Stories of his cruelty and his dramatic death have inspired countless books, plays, and films, ensuring that the shadow of Blackbeard still looms large over the history of the high seas. Anne Bonny was born on the 8th of March in the year 1700 in a small town near Cork in Ireland. Her father, William Cormac, was an attorney by profession. When Anne was only 5 years old, her father decided to leave for the New World, heading to South Carolina, where he acquired a large plantation. Anne's childhood was spent in the lap of luxury, growing up in a grand colonial mansion with a myriad of servants to attend to her every need. Her father spared no expense in providing her with an excellent education, believing it was essential for his daughter's future. As Anne grew, her father began searching for a suitable, wealthy match to secure her future. However, Anne had other plans that would break her father's heart. Without his approval, she secretly married James Bonny, a poor sailor with no wealth to speak of. This shocking act caused a rift between them, and the young couple fled to the island of New Providence to escape her father's fury. Upon arriving on the island, Anne quickly became acquainted with a wealthy planter named Childs Bayard. But her life took a dark turn when she became involved in a scandalous affair that eventually led to the death of the governor of Jamaica's cousin. Anne was arrested and thrown into prison, but her luck was about to change. Bayard, not wanting to lose his investment, bribed officials to free her. Together, they embarked on several trading voyages across the New World. In May of 1719, while visiting a tavern, Anne met the pirate Jack Rackham. Rackham, charmed by her fiery spirit, began to show her his affection. Anne, ever bold and determined, disguised herself as a man and followed Rackham when he set sail. Eager to live the life of a pirate, Anne's time with Rackham proved her to be just as fierce and skilled in battle as any man in the crew. She earned the respect of all the pirates, and her presence became a force to be reckoned with. By chance, the crew captured a ship that was carrying another woman disguised as a man, Mary Reed. Reed, who had military training, was the only passenger who refused to surrender to the pirates and fought back. After several unsuccessful attempts to subdue her, the pirates offered Reed a place on their crew, and she accepted. From that moment on, Anne, Mary, and Jack formed a close-knit team of pirates. In October of 1720, Rackham's ship was captured by Captain Jonathan Barnett, under the orders of the governor of Jamaica, Woodes Rogers. Among the captured pirates were Anne Bonny and Mary Reed. Initially, they were treated as victims, but as witnesses came forward, it became clear that both women were notorious for their foul language and lewd behavior. They had often disguised themselves as men and taken part in raids, wielding pistols alongside the rest of the crew. Once these facts came to light, the court's verdict changed, and both Anne and Mary were sentenced to hang. However, just before their execution, both women claimed they were pregnant. "Our bellies plead for us," they cried, and the court, showing some mercy, postponed the sentence. While Rackham was sentenced to death, he was allowed one final visit with Anne. But instead of offering comfort, Anne, in a moment of frustration, told him that his pitiable state disgusted her. Soon after, both Anne and Mary managed to escape, though some accounts suggest that only Anne made it out. After her escape, Anne Bonny's fate remains a mystery, with no further records of her life. Some believe she eventually made her way to Virginia, where she was buried in the York County Cemetery. From a young age, Anne was known for her fiery temper, which often led her into trouble. She shocked local society by riding around half-naked on horseback, a bold act that raised many eyebrows. On one occasion, in a fit of rage, Anne killed one of her servants with a knife. Thanks to her father's influence and legal savvy, the case was quickly hushed up, and no trial ever took place. In response to Anne's increasingly erratic behavior, her father decided to marry her off, hoping that marriage would calm her rebellious spirit.